I died. I popped out of my body and I just kind of was transported into this beautiful white space. It was home. And I come up over the shoulder of a blue being, which I believe is female, and probably much like the Arcturians, she has a larger head, very large eyes, but like ours. So we looked right in each other's eyes, and I knew, as much as I'm sitting here talking to you now, that was me in there, just in a different body, on a different planet, somewhere else.
We are here with Angela Harris. She has had two near-death experiences. She is presently a board member of the International Association for Near-Death Studies, IANDS, and I'd like to give her a warm welcome. Hi, Angela. How are you?
Hello, AJ. I'm good, and it's so great to see you today. Thank you for having me on.
Can you begin telling us what happened when you were a child?
Yes, I was out in the driveway playing with my dad. He was playing this game with me where I would try to find him with my eyes closed just by listening. And unfortunately, we had a little curb on the side of our driveway, and I got a little bit out of the driveway space, tripped over the curb. I fell and I hit a tree right here with my head. And there was a little piece of branch that was sticking out that was broken off. And that's where it hit. Luckily, not my eyeball, but right above my eye. And I was bleeding very heavily. I remember him pulling me off of it. It was, my skin was stuck to it, and he pulled me off and picked me up and carried me to the house and was yelling for my mom. And I remember, touching my face and looking at my hand, and my hand was, well, as red as my shirt, an interesting color to wear today to tell the story. And he was bloody. When my mom opened the door, she just went pale. And that's really the last thing I remember of that. As far as getting into this out of body NDE like experience. So the next thing I remember of that, and it's like an NDE memory. I'm there, I'm experiencing it. Everything is in my mind as clear as right now. I was in the upper left corner of the room, which happened to be over the door to the living room. And I could see my dad outside in the driveway talking to an ambulance driver, an EMT. I could see my mom sitting on the sofa. And then I was laying on the sofa with my head on a pillow and under a blanket. And I felt that peace and love and light that comes with being in that kind of experience. I was being held in the arms of an angelic female being, and I could feel the tunnel over my shoulder. I can see into the tunnel, and it looked just like when I had my second NDE. It was very velvety, almost like a soft, starry look to it. I was wrapped in the arms of this entity being held, and it felt like we were turned over like this, like she was hovering over me. Her arms were around me, holding me. And I've since come to know that that was my mother-in-law, which is very interesting. I accessed that when I had my second NTE. So to me, the very curious thing about that, or clever thing about it, when you think about what we're all learning from these NDE experiences, is that where she was living at that time, she was most likely awake and obviously incarnated and alive on this planet. So how interesting. How does that work from, the other side? And if we try to think about it from a scientific quantum physics kind of way, it's very curious to me, and something that I'm in pursuit of, is to find more people who've experienced something like that. Unfortunately, she has passed, so I don't have any way to ask her if she would have any memory of that, which would be an interesting conversation. And then it was very quick, and I woke up on the sofa and went on with my life. I didn't have anything in my life at that time that would have helped me understand what happened, explain what happened, have the words for what happened. But once I had my second NDE, that all changed. And that's when I really came home to what happened to me. But I will say now that I have those words and I have a community to talk to at IANDS with the childhood sharing group, it is so much in alignment with what other people experienced for how it affected my life afterwards. I was profoundly affected by that. I would go to church during the summers with my grandmother, and she was in a church where if you didn't believe what they thought and do things the way they said to do it, then you were going to hell for sure. And every time I would hear that, it was like, whoa, wait, that does not sound right to me. That does not feel right. That's an extreme version. But whenever I would bump into anything like that along the way, my soul would really light up and bring me back home to this state of love and compassion, which is the core, the foundation from which we come based on what I learned in my NDEs. And I just would get this feeling of no, 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 that's not right. That doesn't feel right to me. And so that results in a lot of social situations where you're having some trouble, fitting in, if you will, because a lot of society, especially, American society when I was growing up, the Gen X crew, you had to conform and fit into these little cliques and boxes. And people who have a childhood NDE have a hard time doing that because we have a hard time aligning with some of the things that are required to fit into those boxes. So we always feel kind of out of touch, and that's a common thread in this childhood sharing group. So it's been wonderful to find community to talk about that within IANDS for sure. So that's my childhood NDE.
Well, that's interesting. I'm going to ask you a question after I hear your second NDE, which took place in 2015, right? Can you
Yes.
tell us about that one?
Yes, I sure can. I was a teacher, and teaching requires standing up pretty much all day. There's walking around, monitoring the students, but not a lot of sitting down, and that will become important later on. So I was standing up all day, and while I was standing up, my blood pressure was dropping the whole time, as we learned when I died on a tilt table. So one day I was teaching, I wasn't feeling well. I went to the school nurse, and she said, "You don't look good. Can I please take your blood pressure?" She took it. It was really high. It was like 158 over 80, and normally mine is like 116. So she was very concerned. But being a teacher, I went back to my classroom because I didn't want to leave my kids during the day. That's what teachers do. We're there for our kids. And so I went back to the classroom, and I promised that I would go to the doctor at the end of the day. I didn't make it to the end of the day. I just kept feeling worse and worse and worse. And I called her, and she came down and she took my blood pressure, and it had gone up to 180. And so she called an ambulance, and I went to the hospital where they found basically nothing. My blood pressure was high. They got it back down, sent me to a cardiologist, and nothing was wrong. And that's because I actually have a neurological disorder which affects my whole body. And that was getting out of control, this neurological situation, which is called essential tremor plus. It's like Parkinson's, it just has a different source, a different cause to it. So this was diagnosed on a tilt table. The tilt table causes your head and your body, your brain and your body to talk to each other. You can't move around to keep your blood pressure up. You're just strapped to a table, and your body has to do all the work internally through your nervous system. But mine wasn't working. And so my vital signs went down and down and down over 18 minutes. In 18 minutes, I went into seizures and I died. I didn't feel the seizures at all. I think right as the seizures were starting, I popped out of my body in an out of body kind of experience as I was dying, or perhaps right at the start of the NDE. And I was facing myself. So I was out of my body. My consciousness, my soul had come right in front of my own face, which I had no feelings about whatsoever. It was like, oh, there's a body. And I could see my face moving, which would have been the seizures, and then kind of come to a stop. But all at the same time, this is the beautiful part, AJ. I was already experiencing this state of no time because I'm watching myself doing this. I'm focusing on different things all at the same time. So while my spirit body seems oriented on myself, I'm also seeing my husband, who's in the room with me, getting up, coming to me, seeing the doctor putting his hand out to stop my husband from interfering with what the nurse needed to do, hearing the doctor speaking, feeling the nurse who was seated in front of me. So the nurse sits in front of you on a chair while you're on the tilt table to monitor whether you're trying to move or not and compensates for this lack of your nervous system working. So she stands up, comes through what would have been my head of my spirit body, and I feel her pass through me. So I feel her face pass through the back of what would have been my head, or this 360 vision. And then I see the back of her head as she turns and goes to do what she needs to do, which is lower the tilt table so I could stabilize my blood pressure. Literally all at the same time. And it's not just that, I knew what they were thinking. I could hear them. I was in their minds. I knew everything that was going on in that room. And I think this might be the first time I've shared this outside of maybe like my team. I could even see in the waiting room. So, like, if I thought about, oh, where am I? You know, that kind of instantaneous orientation. It was down the hall, into the waiting room, out into the street. I had access to all of it. And I did the same thing I did when I was a child. I floated to the upper left corner of the room in a like feeling like I'm being pulled backwards, and I feel the tunnel over my shoulder, and I focus on that, and I go right into the tunnel, and all of these feelings are occurring. So, you know, coming out of my body, I'm feeling this release of pain, and it feels so good, and all of the love, and the love is growing, and I see my husband, and I see, you know, our past, present, future, why we're there together. All of it's like all wrapped up in one beautiful package. I'm floating to the back of the room. The love is growing. I'm going into the tunnel. The love is growing. I'm seeing the tunnel, experiencing the tunnel. It's silent. I didn't hear any music. A lot of people hear music, and I think, wish I had had some music next time. And there's this beautiful velvety look to it. So it was a dark tunnel that a lot of people see that's kind of famous, but not entirely dark. And it was not scary to me. It was very peaceful and calm. And the edges or spaces that were lit were like when you look at velvet in the light, there's kind of a shimmer to it, and it was moving. And I felt a sense of movement. I felt a sense of movement forward now. So I felt pulled backwards going towards the tunnel, but once I got into the tunnel, I felt that I was moving forwards. And I looked down and, you know, just kind of didn't have any recognition of anything really. I guess it didn't mean anything to me. And I also, at the same time, am kind of looking to my left and my spirit guide is there, which I'm recognizing in that moment. I'm realizing this is a conversation that has been going on my whole life. This person has been with me my whole life. So I'm not suddenly in the tunnel and greeting her. I'm continuing a conversation about what has been happening, which was such a beautiful moment of kind of coming home, right? Coming home to this person that I'm always with. And now I talk to all the time because I have remembrance of that. I'm not under the veil with that still. And she was wearing a beautiful cream dress. She was carrying a book in her arm, which I see as my like a representation of my book of life, sort of. That's the intuition I have from that. Long dark hair, brown eyes, like when I say brown, I'm talking about like caramel when it's in the pan and it's boiling. It's like really beautiful, deep, beautiful eyes. That's one of those ethereal things that there aren't human words to explain. I can see it though. And all along again, it's all occurring together. We're moving forward. I can see a pinprick of light ahead. And as we approach the light, I see within the growing light silver and gold shadows, or shadows isn't the right word, shapes. I don't know. Again, hard to explain that one. Which I'm realizing are, entities, people as we get closer and closer. And it all happens very quickly. And it's like being in a subway tunnel where you're in the dark and then it comes over you, right? Like I just kind of was transported into this beautiful white space, which it was home. I mean, once I think I was still attached to myself and my body the whole time. And in the tunnel, less so. But once I entered this white space, that's where I really released and had some like, I'm home. This is it. I've come back to where I'm truly from. And my family is there waiting for me, family and friends. And it was not so much a homecoming because I went back into my body, but a welcoming party. And so many. So at the front was my most recent from this life family and friends who had transitioned. Didn't see anyone there who was still alive. And then going backwards, whenever I would look at a specific person or entity representing itself as a person to me at that moment, I knew who they were. I could say, oh, okay, I remember you're from this life, past life, or, you're from my life now at a different time, or lots of different connections there. The deepest being when I was able to hug them. So we hugged each other. I felt their bodies. We kissed each other on the cheeks. It was just like when you hug someone on earth. It was warm. It was embracing in a more than just physical way, but when you feel that connection with someone. And when we were hugging, we shared each other's memories. So not only did I feel that person's memories from my point of view, I felt their memories. So I share the one about my uncle because there's a lot of understanding how that plays out. So my uncle lived on a farm and we went to visit them during the summer, and farms are very tactile and smelly, and there's a lot of unique sounds, unique smells, and unique feels to it. So I'm in this embrace with my uncle on the other side, having transitioned in this beautiful waiting room for me. And I'm back on that farm, clear as the day I was there. I feel the sun, I smell the hay, the goats, the chickens, all of it. My family, the barbecue that was going on, the rough wood of the picnic table. It was all a part of this memory. So to me, that's expressive of how when you're on the other side, you're not incarnated, but you think about Earth and your experiences here or your experiences on other planets. That was a marker for me that I can remember those in almost a 3D like way, right? Because all that information was accessible to me. Not just what did I do? What did I eat? But it's immersive. It's absolutely immersive. So he wanted to take me on his motorcycle because he had gotten a motorcycle that year. He was very excited about it. And in that moment, right, I'm feeling that in him. I'm feeling his excitement. He's asking me, but trepidatious about it because he's not sure. I'm 8 years old at that time. Do I want to ride a motorcycle? Am I going to be safe on it? What if something happens? I mean, all the things a loving adult would think about putting a child on the back of their motorcycle. And I was trepidatious about it. But I wanted to make my uncle happy. So instead of saying, I'm not sure I feel safe about it, I said, sure, let's go. So we get on it, and I'm on the motorcycle with him. I'm riding down this shady, beautiful hill with the dappled sun coming through. Right now, in my mind, telling you this story, I'm there. I'm at the end of the hill. There's a corner, and he's thinking, this isn't working. She's not feeling safe. I'm going to turn around. He says to me, do you want to go back? I said, yes. He turned around and we went back. So the importance of that is what I was just saying, that not only can you come back here, if you will, from the other side and revisit your memories, you can feel both sides of that experience. So when you're talking with someone, when you're interacting with someone who you love, but also just strangers in the grocery store or wherever, it's important to remember that you are them, right? So when you go home, you're going to be able to be them and feel things from their point of view. So I did that with lots of people. My mother-in-law who passed, my grandparents, a friend who had committed suicide while I was in high school was there. And those were really beautiful memories that I brought back with me, which have impacted me greatly. Um, and as that's going on, I'm realizing, wow, I think maybe I'm dead. I hadn't really gotten to that point, right? I had been experiencing it all, but not really coming to like it coming into thought and expressing itself. And as I'm thinking that, I'm remembering, wow, there's all this other stuff to me and my soul that is expansive, past lives, planning my life, and lives I'm living concurrently. And as I'm doing that, it's like standing in a river of knowledge. So if we think about maybe like the Akashic records or something like that, that's where all of past, present, future, um, potential futures or potential changes to the lives we're living now, all of that is accessible to me. And as I'm thinking these things, I'm able to answer my own questions, which happens instantaneously. So I was thinking about, I'm living these other lives right now. My soul is just one small part, like a cube on a Rubik's Cube, right? I'm like one little cube, and there's all this moreness to me, muchness to me. And my mind, then, or my soul, travels through space, and I enter this different kind of tunnel or space, but it's like on, I think it's Star Trek, where they're in the ship and they go into warp speed and the suns are going by, and it's like this flashing, sparkling kind of view, not unlike a vortex. And I come up over the shoulder of a blue being, which I believe is female, and probably much like the Arcturians, she didn't have any hair. She was bald. It doesn't mean that everyone of that race is bald, right? It could have just been her, but she's bald. She's It's like a pool blue, but in the shadows more of a cobalt blue. And she has a larger head, very large eyes, but like ours. So almond shaped, same design with the iris and the pupil and all of that. And her color of eye is the same kind of pool blue. Her nose is very soft, especially at the edges. There's very little shadow. So it's not the kind of popped up nose that we have with a strong bony protuberance, right? Small mouth, very slim, slender neck, and very slim shoulders. So what appeared to be a larger head and a smaller body. Now, again, maybe that's just this particular entity's body shape is not reflective of all of the Arcturians or whatever type of race that would be living on that planet. It could just be her, but that's what I saw. And she turned towards me and we acknowledged each other. So we looked right in each other's eyes, and I knew, as much as I'm sitting here talking to you now, that was me in there, just in a different body on a different planet somewhere else. Wow. And then I was like, oh, yeah, I mean, it was so like, well, obviously in the moment, now I feel differently about it. But in the moment, I definitely felt like, oh, okay, that's me. Yeah, hey. And then I immediately was being pulled backwards again and then shot forward. And the next stop was what a lot of people tell me is a mantis being. Again, a little bit different than like the illustrations I see of mantis, more ant-like, a rusty red color, an exoskeleton, um, just like if you think about an ant on Earth, only upright and about 9 feet tall. So the same shape of head with a smaller kind of mouth area, if you will, big round eyes that were very dark. The roundness comes from light that was reflecting off of it in those little crescent shapes, which let me know there were little like antenna on the nose part, the thorax and abdomen. So I was able to see really most of the body of this one, and the same leg shape, that you would see here with the, kind of backwards knee kind of thing going on. And a militaristic kind of feel to that version of me, which is interesting because I've learned the mantis people are like a police race, if you will, in galaxies. So that's interesting. And same thing, turned, we looked at each other. There was that love and connection and feeling of, I am you, I know you, just popping in to say, hey, thanks for helping me remember that this is going on outside of me. And I went backwards again, and then I went off. And the whole time, too, I'm kind of like popping back to where I was in the waiting room as I kind of switched my thoughts to, I should say, from, do I have other lives? Yes, I have other lives. And, here are some examples of that. And while I'm in the white space, I'm also thinking, oh, wow, that's, really interesting because I'm Angela on Earth right now. And the portal would open up as I remembered my husband and my children. And was able, so the white wall, if you will, although I don't know what it was because there was nothing to define walls, floors, ceiling. It was just white light, white cottony space around me would open up. And through this circular portal, I was able to see my husband in the hospital room. And I was able to see what was going on. And I was able to access his thoughts and hear him there. And then next to that was another portal that opened up, and I was able to see my children where they were. And the interesting thing about that is that when I would look at my children, it was like they were flickering back and forth, like turning on a light switch, on off, on off, on off, like that. And um, when I would look at my daughter, Lily, who was about 8 years old at the time, I saw her as a grown man in jeans and a polo shirt with a beard. And I never shared that with my family. I didn't share any of this part of it. And my daughter Lily is now Adam, a grown man who has transitioned to become, a trans man. So I was able to see the future then through that portal with that flickering back and forth. And the same thing with my youngest daughter, Caroline. She wants to become a physical therapist. So that would explain why I saw her in a white lab coat as an adult woman. Yeah. And, again, I haven't influenced them in any way. They've gotten here on their own. They're doing their own thing. So beautiful to see that. In that, then, I also saw a future Earth. Um, the future that I saw is not all great. So we get to a point potentially because there's free will, in my opinion. And so I think we can navigate our way through this differently than what I saw from the other side. But also I saw my children's futures. So, take what I'm about to say into your own space in the way that you take it. But what I saw is that we have a lot of migration going on right now, and that was a big part of this. So these groups are migrating to other places because they're not getting what they need where they live, and they need to migrate to be able to survive in a happy, healthy way. But the people who already live there, as we're seeing, aren't necessarily feeling comfortable with that. And that eventually leads to a world war. And we're kind of starting to see a little bit of a start of that now with Ukraine and in a few other areas as well. And it's not pretty, it's not good. There's a lot of population now, which is starting to decline, and that continues. So the population declines, there's a big war, a lot of people are lost in the war, and people aren't really giving birth at the rate that they were before. So we have a big population drop. And this smaller amount of population then moves into a state where they're living not on the global stage that we are now with, like my husband travels all the time, all over the world. That subsides and we stay in our own spaces more. So if you think about the town where you're living and how that town becomes much more diverse in the type of people that live there and in acceptance of people's beliefs and the way that they do things, and everybody gets along and is okay with everyone's choices and the way that they do things, and also lives within their space. So it's not moving back to an agrarian type of society, but we don't ship bananas all over the world anymore. Instead, we grow what we can grow where we are, and we eat what we grow and what we can create to sustain ourselves within our smaller spaces rather than shipping things all over, which helps the climate to stabilize because of all the pollution from trucks and boats and all the things that are transporting all of these really heavy goods. So I see little tidbits of that happening. It's been 9 years since my experience, and I see us walking towards that. But like I said, we'll see. We'll see what comes of that. And then I also had a life review, and it was very much like the life reviews you hear from other people. It was like a movie playing, but more in my 360 vision. You didn't see it like on a wall, or someone saw theirs in like a crystal box, which would be really cool. It was like memories going by, and I accessed information about why are there bad people in the world? Why is there evil? And that was with my father. My father was abusive, and in my life review, I was able to really see how I assisted him, and it helped me access my pre-birth planning and really planning during my life, because we kind of have access to the other side while we sleep. And what I was able to see is that his soul, the soul that was within him, wanted to come to Earth to experience what it's like to be a not nice person and to perpetrate abuse. And in doing that, learning from it and bringing back that knowledge to everyone, to the one, right? When he passes, and even now, he's disseminating that information amongst all of us about how it's painful and long lasting and hurtful and why you shouldn't do that, right? He's serving as that example to me, and now to you, because I'm sharing this story with you, of the impact of that and how important it is then to be loving and pure and good, and to set aside these human-based desires to, do what has been really taught to us by our culture, right? So he was abusive because he was abused. It's that whole traumatic cycle there where it's feeding down, and you have to learn to break that cycle. So in that, I also was able to see that this is an important part of being on Earth. If we didn't have yin and yang, good and bad, then we wouldn't be able to have the depth of the experiences that we're having. That's very hard to hear when you've been through trauma, when you've been through a horrific experience with someone, when someone has forced themselves upon you. It's not easy to hear. It does not take the pain away. And I'm not saying that it should, because we need that. That's what we're here for. That's what I pulled away from that experience. So I experienced a lot. One thing I want to finish up with that life review is that I didn't I didn't get judged. I judged myself. So the whole time I'm standing there, floating there, out of body in this beautiful place, however you would explain that. My family's around me, my friends are around me, all these beautiful souls. My life guide is next to me, and they're all cheering me on. I'm chastising myself. Like, I can't believe I did that. That was horrible. I'm looking at nice Angela from my angelic viewpoint, and it's like, what? I really need to do better next time, even though they were very small things. And they're all like, you did great. You were awesome. Love it. And I come to the end of my life review and I'm thinking, well, because I'm still kind of attached to my earth self, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I should like, go to purgatory or go to hell for a little while or something. I don't know. Like I said, I didn't even do anything that bad, right? I maybe cut people off or, you know, had those human emotions every once in a while. And this is what I'm thinking. So my life guide Melanie is saying, no, 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 no. That's you're still attached to your human body. You know, you did great. And at the same time, my mother-in-law, hold on to that, right? Says, no, she has to go home and take care of the kids. And that's when I woke up in my body, which to me is the humor of the other side, that my mother-in-law would tell me to go home and take care of the kids. Yeah. So I woke up on the tilt table in the hospital room and did not want to be back. You know, I had seen that my kids would be fine without me, that time is really just a construct of humanity, and they would be back with me on the other side pretty much instantaneously. And I wasn't in pain anymore. And I really was able to acknowledge how much pain I had been in that I had grown used to and was kind of ignoring. And so I closed my eyes really tight and just hoped. Chase DeMaio did the same thing. Just close your eyes really tight and just hope if I just lay here and pray hard enough, I can go back. That didn't happen, obviously, because I'm here now talking to you. But I'm glad that it didn't, because I get to be here and live my life to the fullest now, truly to the fullest, because now I'm in touch with my true self, right? I remembered who I truly am, and I can bring that to my family and to you.
I know that you started sharing this publicly more or less recently. How long did it take you to understand what had happened and to integrate this experience?
When I got home from the hospital, I had to take a week off. And during that week, I was working from home. And so I had to use the laptop a lot and my cell phone. And every time I would touch them, I got this horrible shock. Still do. So I have extreme electrical sensitivity. If I wear an eye watch, it actually burns my arm, and I have a red mark on my arm for like 3 days. The light bulbs were burning out. And so I did what all people do. I Googled it, and it took me to IANDS. Just I got directed to, it's a near death experience. Here's this organization that provides support and education. And I didn't so much engage with IANDS right away. That took about 5 years, actually. I needed to heal. You know, it's rather traumatic, dying and coming back, and what causes that. So, you know, I had this illness, and I have walked myself back pretty far from where I was then. I was sometimes needing a cane. I would have to hold onto walls when I walked. I was pretty ill at that time. And so I needed to deal with that. You know, a lot of my time was spent taking care of my little kids. I spent a further year teaching, healing myself, reading, listening to stories, and just getting familiar with it, you know, learning the language and becoming comfortable with it. And yeah, I mean, it was 2000. I actually started a girls group through National Charity League in there. We moved, there was a lot going on. And in 2000, the late 2019, early 2020, when the pandemic was beginning, IANDS had a portion of it through Chuck Swedrock that was starting some online sharing groups and the webinars that are there now at isco.iands.org. And he was looking for somebody to help with the website. And I had done that through a lot of different venues and sent him some samples, and he liked what I had done. And so he brought me on to work on that. And that, just kind of blossomed into what I do now, which is oversee the groups and events and a team of people who help make all that happen. Um, and I really attribute my comfort level with sharing to IANDS. When I had my experience, it was probably about a month before I told my husband. When I sat up on the tilt table in the hospital room, I was disoriented. Obviously, I didn't feel very well. They were giving me water and cookies, and the doctor was telling me what had happened and how I needed to care for myself until I got back to my neurologist. But I do remember him saying, because I probably looked pretty disoriented, I remember him saying something to me about, "Did you see something?" And thinking, I totally saw something. I just saw my husband's mother-in-law who passed a couple of years ago on the other side. And I had this incredible adventure. But I didn't, my body was still coming back online. I wasn't comfortable saying anything. I didn't know this person. My husband was right there. And what's the comfort level there where in front of a stranger, right? I'm having this conversation with them about, I just saw your mother-in-law on the other side. And I know you're an atheist, but here you go, surprise. So I waited until I was more in tune with it and we were in the right moment to say something. And he took it very well. He's been very, very supportive. My kids are supportive. My son Adam actually does work for IANDS as well. So that has gone really well. I have a friend who is very supportive with me. And then I have my IANDS family to talk to about it, which is beautiful. So through all of that, I eventually got to a spot where I was feeling like, all right, well, I'll go ahead and share my story. So what took so long? I think I was just listening to everyone else's stories and enjoying being in that space. And eventually got to a spot of, all right, I think it's time for me to go ahead and do this on my own. My story, when told full out, is pretty extensive. I mean, it would be a full book. So it's hard to like squish it down into it's like hitting stops really quick. But yeah, it's been beautiful and cathartic. It feels good to share.
You mentioned the fact that you could experience being, apart from Angela, you experience being these other multi-dimensional beings or beings from another reality, like this mantis and the blue being, and you also experience being your uncle. So, do you think that we are all one, and that due to the fact that we are all basically one consciousness, we can access being other people? Or were these other aspects of you?
I think it's a little bit of both. So when I was hugging my family members and my friends, I didn't feel the same way as when I saw myself existing on other planets. I felt like I was just in that moment with them, so that we're more like two different souls that are a part of the one. And so my uncle is a different soul, but we're all contributing to the benefit of the one singular consciousness. But when I saw, like when I looked myself in the eye, when I was on these other planets in my soul body, seeing myself incarnated in another body, I definitely felt differently. I felt that's me, that's my soul. So that's why I think the Rubik's Cube analogy works well. That if we think about my soul being like a Rubik's Cube, and Angela is one of the little cubes on the bigger one, and then The blue entity is yet another cube. And then the mantis entity is yet another one that's me. And then my uncle would be another separate Rubik's Cube, but I can still access his feelings because we're all part of one giant one, right? That eventually locks together and becomes the one singular consciousness. And we're divided out to be able to have these different experiences. To me, it's kind of like a part of the forgetting process that when we split apart from the one singular soul, it allows us to go immerse ourselves more, even more than just the veil gives me now here on earth. Complicated, but that's how I see it in my mind. That's what I came away with as an explanation that works.
According to what I have learned from different religions, the essence of all the ancient spiritual teachings is that we are all one, and that this world is an illusion because we think we are individuals, but in reality, we are all one. And I see that you have the Buddha in the background. And so I was wondering, what are your religious beliefs now? Do you understand that all religions share the same common roots of oneness?
Oh, yeah, definitely. As I was saying, from my childhood NDE, I really took to more of the Buddhist, Taoist kind of thought patterns. And when I was in college, so early on in college, I took a comparative religions course and still was in the same space of religions that at their not at the foundation, but more extensive interactions in the world, in public. I've got a couple of different words in my mind for that, are love based, right? Compassion based, and wanting to make sure that everyone is feeling safe and happy and secure, and erasing lines of division and judgment rather than creating them. That's where I always felt the most at home. But I've never belonged to a religion, I think, if you put it that way. I went to church with my grandmother, but I wouldn't say I belonged to that religion. I sat in church and didn't agree with what they said. So that is pretty much a no. But if there were any, then yes, I would say it would be Hinduism, Taoism, Buddhism would be much more my speed.
Regarding this war that you witnessed or foresaw, would you say this was a nuclear war, or what type of war did you see? And did you see like a world calamity or major extinction or what?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it an extinction, but I saw a big drop in population during the war, and I did see some nuclear use. It was very limited because it's very devastating, but I did see those used, and I'm not comfortable saying who's using it or where it's going, but mostly just more like the previous world wars where there are places where it's concentrated and focused and it's more of a on the ground troops battling troops kind of war that ends with the nuclear situation.
What are your present views on death and life after death? And what would you tell someone who's worried about death or recently lost a loved one or has a terminal disease?
That's a hard one to answer. In my near-death experiences, I've seen that there's more on the other side, and it's a wonderful transition. So we are here and we're very immersed in our lives, and they're beautiful and full and rich with experiences. And that continues on and gets better on the other side. So it's a step, it's not an end, it's not a completion. It's a step forward in your path of life. So it's all cyclical. You came from there to be here, and you're moving on from here back to there. And what you do from that will be your own journey.
Thank you, Angela. I'm glad we had this conversation.
Likewise.
How can people contact you?
Well, I am at IANDS, so you can contact me at angela@iands.org, and that IANDS is IANDS.org. I welcome conversation. So if you listen and you have questions or you want to connect with me and have a conversation, I'm happy to do that. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And AJ, thank you so much for letting me share my story.
This has been the AJ Parr Spiritual Journalist Podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe.